welcome to the Sharp Way Show. Yes, it is a little bit past. No, actually, it's exactly 7 p.m. on the East Coast. I'm on time. Look at me. Yes, on the East Coast. So it is me, Larry Sharp, here on the Sharp Way Show. Thank you so much for giving me a small chunk of your evening. And you know what I'm going to ask you, because I always ask you this. Do what you have to do. You know the show's going to be great. So already click the like button. Click that like button now if you can. It would help tremendously. Everything you possibly can do to make that happen is going to help me deal with my algorithms, as you know. And if you happen to be watching on Twitter, then retweet this. Not too tough, right? You can do it. It's free. Don't be a nudge. Just retweet it. I get it. Thank you, guys. Look, tonight, I have with me someone who is a very impressive person, someone who has played the heavy hitter college game, played the kind of entrepreneur gig game, been on the big shows, all that stuff. But she's here with me today. She is a New York Post columnist and host of the podcast, The Lost Debate, the woman herself, Rikki Schlott. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me and for that kind intro.
There we go. I love it. And if you want to follow Rikki, please do so. You can head over to her website to see what she's doing, rikkischlott.com. And if you are listening to this, it's R-I-K-K-I, not C-I, not C-K, R-I-K-K-I, and Schlott is S-C-H-L-O-T-T. Good German, a good German spelling there. Nice. Absolutely. And of course, Twitter also at Rikki Schlott. Well, what I really want to bring up here, if I could, is the idea of a Gen Z attitude. Now, I'm a Gen Xer. A lot of my friends are Gen Xers or even boomers. And boy, we're always like, damn Gen Z, damn millennials. Back in my day, I mean, we're always like yelling to get off our lawn. But you are one of them, if that makes any sense. You are.
Indeed.
My daughter is. My daughter is 19. So my daughter is also. So tell me, what is this Gen Z attitude? Are we on to something, or are we just old people yelling at screaming at the kids get off my lawn?
I really think that there is a specific kind of vibe about my generation that is almost a little more of like a monolith than usual, because we all grew up on social media. And so we're all so interconnected that there's one meme or trend and then everyone's saying the same phrases. And like, I went to college at NYU and I have friends from all around the world, and we had a very common cultural kind of background because of social media. I would say I do kind of feel like a get off my lawn elder sometimes with people in my generation. My dad is 85. And so I was raised with a much broader kind of generational purview, thanks to him, I would say.
So your dad's a boomer.
My dad is actually silent generation. He's pre-boomer. So I was a late addition, and he's my best friend and a wonderful person who I think made me a little more resistant to the generational tides, if I might say so myself. I would hope that I am. I think there's some good things about my generation, but there are some less flattering attributes that I think that we have. And I very much agree with the thesis of the coddling of the American mind and some of the shortcomings of my generation.
But you've just brought up something that to me seems shocking, which you said you're kind of a monolith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with our current, I don't know, disparate maybe is the right word, social media and ability to find our news in so many different places, one would assume that the opposite is true, right? So wait a minute, how can this be when she gets her news off of this Twitter follower, this one gets it off of a TikTok creator, this one's watching YouTube and it's a different creator? How can your generation be a monolith? When I was growing up, there's 3 channels, right? So we all got our news from ABC, NBC, or CBS. But you don't have that. How is it still a monolith when there's so many different places for us to touch?
Yeah, I would say there's certainly like ideological diversity in the way that there kind of always has been. But in terms of our kind of cultural ethos and the way that something will trend or everyone will start texting the same thing, I think a lot of that stuff just kind of happens in very broad sweeps, and the same content's on TikTok and getting reposted to Instagram and here and there. But I think there's also we talk a lot in the media about how you end up in rabbit holes and going down ideological holes, and I do feel like because young people tend to be more progressive, there is kind of people just gravitating towards the same sort of outlets or the same sort of media. And when you're growing up and developing your opinions in a social media algorithm world, like that almost reinforces itself. And so I do think there is a little more political homogeneity as a result of that sometimes. We're kind of getting stuck in our vantage point. And I mean, I'm guilty of it myself too. And I think everyone is, but growing up that way and getting your news that way through that algorithm sort of system, I think is a unique challenge for Gen Z, because if you're starting in the rabbit hole, it's even harder to pull out of it.
But doesn't that also, right? If I'm going down a rabbit hole and I watch the cool videos, or I listen to the cool, video essayist or whatever, or whoever I've watched, don't I now think that I'm smarter than you, right? Yeah. When I was a kid, right? I grew up in the 70s. So when I grew up in the 70s, you'd watch the news. Everyone watched the news. So we were talking about what we all watched, right? Didn't you hear him say that? What do you think about that? That's how we talked. But in the 80s was still the same, right?
Yeah.
Now, though, I come up to you and I go, Rikki, you don't know the truth because I watched 3 hours. I went down this rabbit hole. So now I know the truth and you don't. Doesn't that make a lot of young people think they're even smarter than they are?
Oh, certainly it does, I think. And especially tapping into that at such a young age. I mean, even I remember going down, like being a teenager. I grew up in a conservative household in a probably moderate area of New Jersey. And so I would kind of put my upbringing in the middle. And yet I had phases where I was in this weird like algorithm loop where I was like, oh, my parents don't know anything. And I'm hearing all these liberal voices and I know so much more than my dad, who's seen decades of life before I was even born. And then I flipped to the other side and I'm like consuming something else and getting reinforced. And so I think there's certainly a sense that like when you have blinders on and you go down that rabbit hole, that especially with young people, I think there's a lack of epistemic humility, I would say. And
hold on, say that again. Lack of epistemic humility. Oh, so good. I see why you're a columnist. Nicely done.
Yeah, I think there's like, I really do cringe sometimes. I think my generation tends more than prior generations to just dismiss the wisdom of older generations. And even if you disagree, to think like, even if somebody in the past did something that's morally reprehensible by today's standards, something that they said might be worth listening to. Or even if I disagree with the politics of my grandfather, something that he's lived and experienced is worth opening my ears to. And it disappoints me that I see a lot of people in my generation feel like because like they're in this enlightened moment and all of a sudden humanity has just figured everything out and they're the chosen ones. It does disappoint me to see that.
So I want to touch two pieces. One is back to the monolith piece, and then that other, and the people from the past piece, the monolith piece. I have two daughters. One is 12. One is 13 now. Coming up 13. The other one's on 19. So 6 years apart.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're two different generations. Now, that wasn't true when I was growing up. Most people who grew up in my age, regardless of where you came from, if you were American, you kind of had some similar piece, right? If you ever watched some of the earlier Family Guy cartoons, there's so many references to my age because it's all written by Gen Xers, right? Yeah. So there's so many references written for my age, and everyone in my age gets all the references, right? We get it all. My daughter has no idea. I have to go on YouTube and show her the thing and say, this is what classic Star Trek is. Like she has no idea what that is, right? So I had to show her that, right? Here's the joke, right? That kind of thing. So to do that. But now my daughter's only, and if anyone would say 10 years ahead of me, 10 years behind me, we still kind of got it. But my daughters are 6 years apart. And I feel like they're a different generation. Is that a thing or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes I'll say Gen Z is an old Gen Zer, and some of my attributes I already don't really understand what's happening. Like before TikTok was TikTok, it was Musically, and all of a sudden I'm like, there's a new app, and I already feel old, but I'm still in high school. And especially with technology, like I was thankfully not part of the iPad generation that grew up already plugged in. I mean, I had an iPhone when I was 10, but I was not handed an iPad when I was 2. And so I think the exponential technological change and just how early kids are checking into social media is, I mean, I don't even know. Sometimes I feel very out of touch with like the lingo and the culture of my generation already, and I'm 22. So I think
that's the funny part you bring up, right? When I raised my first daughter, she didn't get an iPad till later on. But my second daughter, she had an iPad fast, 3, 4, very young.
Yeah.
And I'm a very, I guess maybe libertarian parent. I never blocked my kids from anything because I figured they would see it anyway.
Yeah.
So instead, I was very open with them about it. I expressed what it was. We talk about it. And I'm lucky both of my daughters so far, at least, we'll see how long this will last. So far, they're very open about things, either me or my wife telling what they see, what they're talking about, what they're worried about. And they don't seem shocked because they avoid it. It's not a taboo, if that makes any sense. Like, I'm not going to try to stop my daughter from seeing racy things on the internet. I can't. And if I tried to, the boys in her school would show her anyway, right? So it really wouldn't matter, right? They would just show her anyway. So I was very open on that. The thing that I did, and you tell me if you think I did the right thing here. This is probably about 6 or 7 years ago. My oldest daughter is watching on her iPad. She's watching at the time. I think PewDiePie was very popular then. I'm not sure if he still is, but he was then at least very popular as a YouTuber. And she's watching PewDiePie, who's watching someone else. No, he's watching PewDiePie, and PewDiePie is commenting on someone else playing a video game.
Yeah.
And in my head, mind blown. What? Why would you, what? Either listen to the tutorial or play the game. That's what my Gen X brain said, right? You don't do that. So instead of me getting angry, upset, or going, get off my lawn, I instead said, baby, why are you watching him? And she told me something that was so insightful for me, to the Gen Z generation. She said, Dad, I feel like I'm watching with him. And when she said that, I was like, that's her virtual friend. Like, that's her virtual friend. That's a parasocial relationship. Yeah. And I said, I'm not okay with that, but I can't fight him. I can't beat PewDiePie.
Yeah.
But I can join him. So I decided to watch along with her. I subscribed to PewDiePie and we'd watch the things together and talk about it. I got a Roblox account so I could play Roblox with her. I got a Minecraft account so I could play Minecraft. I did all the things to be part of her world, realizing there's no way I could fight that power, but I could join it. Yeah. So I joined it. And even when my kids want to play games, what I would do is, you want to play Roblox? Okay, you can. I'm not going to stop you. Play mine. You can. But play it in the living room and allow me and or your mom and or your sister to play along with you if we want. Yeah. And what happened was they weren't sitting in their room by themselves watching videos. Yeah. They were with us, sometimes watching videos, and also inviting me. Hey, Dad, look at this video. Hey, Mom, look at this video. It became a family thing because I knew I couldn't beat it. Yeah. And so far with my oldest daughter, my youngest daughter, the jury's still out. The oldest daughter, it's worked. Yeah. I don't know if it's gonna work for the youngest one. I don't know. Tell me you're a Gen Z specialist. Am I screwing up?
No, actually, I haven't heard anyone kind of propose that model of dealing with social media. I think it's true that you can't really keep the cat in the bag. I do think that I agree with people who say, like, in terms of like Instagram and more personal social media, maybe like parental pacts of just not allowing the FOMO sort of thing to play out for girls is a healthy thing. But I think that I think it's completely true that these sort of still, to me, strange as an old Gen Z parasocial relationships sort of pop up, and there's the influencer economy that kind of incentivizes people to create this one-ended sense that you know them intimately, which I think is a little strange that kids are growing up feeling as though they know these influencers in a way that like they're just like live streaming their entire lives. But I think making that an actual social component of their day is a super healthy approach. I've actually never heard that. And
look at that. I'm special.
Yeah, no, I've never heard anyone propose that. I actually think that's a really healthy way to make something that is, I think, to a certain degree inevitable. Something.
And I also didn't want them to be thought of as the weird kids in school. Right. So if I hold everything back from them, then they're going to go to school and everyone's going to say, did you see that thing on whatever is the cool app? And I'm like, I didn't see it. So now they feel awkward. They're struggling already in school, right? So they got to struggle more. Then they're going to come home and want it and they're going to hide it from me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to hide it. Don't hide it. Do the thing in front of me so we can handle it. Right.
Yeah,
That was my thought process. I guess I was too humble. I always talk about raising kids. I always say the same thing. And people get mad at me when I say it, but I don't care. I say it anyway. And that is, if you want to be a parent, there are two things you have to really understand if you want to be a good parent. Number one, kids don't do what you say, they do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, you cannot and never will be your kids. So you can't control them and you can't protect them. You must train them to protect themselves. You must train them to control themselves. Otherwise, that's it. And if you understand that, your most important thing is to be the right example.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I think that's kind of a parenting philosophy that's been lost on my generation.
Yes.
I'm so overprotected. I'm really glad to have an older parent, and my mom's has this, like, her family's from Eastern Europe, and I kind of feel like she has this kind of tough sensibility about her. And so she was never going to model me. And so I'm really appreciative of that, because I think there's just so much, like, everything. I have friends still, and I love them, and I don't mean to like bash them, but they'll call their parents if they have like a work issue and be like,
I know.
what do you do? And sometimes I want to call my mom too, but I'm like, no, I need to work this out for myself as much as I can. Sometimes I do call her, but
my daughter knows that if she calls me, I'm done. She's not gonna help.
Yeah, or like the parents that do the school projects for them, or will write their essays, and I've just there's a lot of paving the road for the kid, and it's really disappointing to me how much that really seems to be the way that so many people in my generation are raised. But I do think that there is kind of a renewed mindfulness and like the free range parenting sort of thing that Lenore Skenazy promotes. Like, I do think the pendulum has swung so far that I think
it has to come back.
Non-political sense, people are kind of being like, no, the kids have to get out. And especially with the pandemic, I think that became that much more obvious, and the detriment that it was doing, it was like it just exponentially increased. And we were like, oh, we've kind of been doing a model of locking kids down by not letting them.
Let me grab a comment if I could.
Yeah.
Jean says, my sister is 13 years older than I, and I had a brother 9 years older than I. It was like my mom raised two different generations. Ooh, interesting. Yeah, I think if there is a big gap, sometimes it does seem kind of odd, right? If there is a big gap. Absolutely. Okay. Let me, if I could, guys, if you're watching this on Twitter, please retweet this now, right? If you like what we're saying, retweet this. If you want to get your chat up ahead and you want to support the channel, if you're on Larry Sharpe YouTube, use super chats. They're there on Larry Sharpe YouTube if you want to. It helps out the channel if you want to. Makes things pop. People see it. It's a lot of fun if you want to do that also. So if you can, that'd be amazing. So I want to stay on, if I could, this idea of your generation. And it's almost like, I guess this goes to the college part we're talking about. You were in college. Yeah. You went to NYU and you accepted to Columbia. Is that right?
Yeah, I did 2 years at NYU and got into Columbia about a year ago for a continuing education program that I'm sitting on that acceptance, and I don't really feel that motivated to go back to higher education.
There we go.
Yeah.
So, but when you were at NYU, you mentioned that it felt like the system had actually deputized almost everybody to be like an offensive speech gatekeeper or something, right? Tell me about that.
Yep. So when you get to NYU, one of the first things you have to do is go to the public safety office, and they give you an ID card. Yep. And they give you a little ID card to get in everywhere. And on the back, it's like your go-to guide, and you're 18 and moving to New York. So that's kind of a daunting thing. And so they give you like the emergency services, the health center, wellness line for mental health crises or anything like that. Like the things that you need for school. And then right below it is the bias response phone number, which...
Hold on, the bias response phone number.
Yeah, the bias response line. So it's this hotline that you can call if you ever encounter whatever one might interpret as bias. And so I think there's a charitable read on that of like, maybe, God forbid, kids at NYU are just like racially aggressing each other all day long. It's never been my experience, but like maybe they're trying to genuinely protect people against like discrimination that happens on campus. But
I'm born and raised in New York City.
Mhm.
You're across the river in Jersey.
Mhm.
That kind of thing is not common.
No,
It
certainly
just
not in a
isn't
progressive
common.
school like NYU. And so when I
Yeah.
saw that, I was like, what is this and why do we need it? And I don't know what message it really sends to kids moving to college that like this is such a hostile environment that you might need a
Yes.
hotline. And so I dug into this a little deeper, and they released a report that showed that the vast majority of calls, they kind of piloted this program for a year. The vast majority of calls raised to the level of like nothing came of them because they were an example of like a tier 3 call would be cultural appropriation, or that you felt offended by something that happened. And so essentially this truly was an offense hotline. And I think that
Yes. Cultural appropriation. They call for that one.
yeah, exactly. And that was the vast majority of calls that they got. It was like less than 1% ended in any sort of disciplinary action of something legitimate happening on campus, which in one way is a good thing. But in another way, it's like, why don't you just go to the administrators? And why have we created this bureaucratic sort of sense that everyone around you is maybe going to snitch on you? And they put the posters for it on the back of the bathroom stalls. I don't know why they do that as well. And like the library, in case you're aggressed in the library, I guess. But yeah,
Librarians can be mean. I mean, they can be.
yeah, apparently. So I felt like that really sent a strange message I think a lot of
So I want to be clear. So if I'm new, right? So I come from, I don't know, Kansas,
Mhm.
and I go to NYU, and I get my card. I'm in the big city for the first time. I'm worried. Where do I go? What do I do? I get my card. I got my hotline, and I got my bias response team on standby in case something happens. So I go to the library, and I see, does someone microaggress you? Call the hotline or whatever, right? I'm in the bathroom. Call the hotline. Did someone appropriate your culture? Call the hotline. My question is, assuming that someone appropriated my culture or offended me, what does the hotline do? Number one. And number two, why wouldn't I handle it myself?
Yeah.
Those two separate questions. So what does the hotline do that I couldn't do if I'm mad because you said, I don't know, you called me a word I didn't like. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't I learn to deal with that and say, hey, Rikki, please don't call me that word. I don't like it or whatever. Yeah. Or does a hotline specialist show up and then say, Rikki, bad? Is that what happens?
Yeah, so it's supposed to be just for like the severe cases, but it's clearly not being used in that sense. And the school knows as much. They published a report. But yeah, so what happens is apparently it's not 24/7. You'll just get sent to a voicemail basically, but it's an administrative line that goes to the dean of whatever, like the Office of Student Services or something along those lines. And yeah, I mean, the message is a message that I think has consistently been sent to my generation, where like every time you don't just go and play, like you have a play date and someone's there. And if there's something that happens, you go and you tell a parent, and then they mediate the issue. And I think it's so like we've been basically taught to short circuit working things out and having interpersonal issues.
Yes.
And always going through an authority figure and needing an authority figure. And I think that's a really key point to the coddling of the American mind. And that book pointed out that if you're raised that way, and then you go to college, well, then the administrators need to be the parents that do that. And so that's exactly what this hotline is doing. And I think now that we've ended up, like the oldest of Gen Z is in corporations now, we're calling HR managers to work out like little scuffles on Slack.
Yes.
And I've talked to a lot of HR people who are like, yeah, I don't know how to deal with you guys and your energy. And I don't really blame them, because we're looking for an authority figure to mediate things. And
there are two things you brought up that I see in my world. I'm a business consultant. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I find all the time is trying my best to stop leaders from outsourcing their leadership to HR.
Yeah.
So now you're having managers who aren't managing. Yeah. The second there's a problem, they go right to HR. Yeah. So HR takes care of HR becomes the management of the entire organization. Yeah. There's no need for managers. There's no need. It might as well be a flat organization with a president, HR, and workers, because everyone else who's in charge they get second guessed and questioned and right to HR. HR winds up doing, and HR people, I'm not against HR people, but they're just humans. How can they all of a sudden fix everything? HR has become the police force of the business world.
Yeah.
We have a problem in outside of the business world. We call a cop for everything. Someone's mad at me. I call the cop. I fell down. I call the cop. I call a cop for everything. How can cops do it? They can't do everything. They're just human beings. Cops can't do everything. Yeah. And now we have the same thing in business. HR does everything and now becomes a cop. You can't call HR for everything. So I get what you're saying with that completely. I'll tell you a quick story. My daughter, when she was in school, she was being bullied by a boy. I've taught my daughter to fight back. She did verbally, and she insulted him so horribly, he went home and told his mom. Mom calls up, get the idea. They bring me in. If your daughter's being bullied, she has to tell somebody. I said, well, she just defended it. She handled herself. No. She has to so she has to be bullied and then hope you fix it. And the guy went, he's vice president, goes, yes. I said, so she can't fight back, so she's going to be in trouble for defending herself? He went, yes. We usually suspend a kid for defending themselves against the bully. He said it straight faced. It wasn't like he was like, I'm so sorry. I know this is a stupid idea. He was like, nope, that's what we do. And I said, oh, he goes, we might not suspend her. I said, no, suspend her. He was like, what? I said, no, suspend her. He's like, I said, yeah, I'll take her out. We'll have a great time. We'll have a great day. Please suspend her. It's fine. He said, well, no, we won't. And he couldn't accept that I didn't care, that I knew his school meant nothing. I knew her high school experience outside of her experiences, her grades mean nothing. I know her college degree means nothing. Like, I know these things mean nothing in life. And he couldn't stand that. And he got mad. And he was like, I'm not going to suspend you then because you're not scared. The goal wasn't to suspend. The goal was to instill fear so that she would acquiesce.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
Yeah. There's such a strange, trickle down effect, I think, of just being in such a litigious society of if you don't repeat it, or if you don't say the right thing or put it down in writing, and then this person started it, and then there's a very much a sense of that in schools. And I think that kind of has risen up to the college level of having something like a hotline where you're going to put it in writing, and you're going to kind of go at this little legal battle against your school bully. I think it's really, I applaud you for standing up to that, because it's completely true that, especially in the era of social media and stuff, you always want that written trail of who started what, and how can the authority figure kind of come in and say, okay, here's the bully and the victim and the good and the evil, and has to be this sort of binary, which I think is really a misguided way to look at interpersonal.
Well, I think you brought up a very important point, which is, I think the legal system is a key problem here, right? Because as a general rule, if you're an administrator, you don't care about the kids at all. I don't mean to be mean, but they don't. I know them. They don't care. What they care about is their nice, cushy job, their nice pension, not getting sued, and not getting fired. That's what they care about. I get that. That's what they want to do. And if there's a minister right now listening, he's like, damn you. But anyway, still true. So that's what they care about. Well, lawsuits, that gets you fired. Losing a lawsuit, that gets you not ever hired again.
Yeah.
So they know that. So they need to have all their ducks in a row, so that when the vulture lawyers come in, they can go, he's crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's. This is a tough case. I don't want to sue. There's easier fish to fry someplace else. I'll leave him alone and go beat somebody else up. I think that's a key part. Am I wrong there?
No, not at all. And I think there also, when you just look at the bloat of the administrative class, especially on college campuses, the numbers, I don't have them off the top of my head, but just since the 90s, the numbers and the percentage of the faculty that are administrators that need to do something to basically justify their jobs and just keep themselves busy. And all of a sudden we look at DEI became a enormous, hugely valuable industry, instantaneously. And a lot of these people's jobs are materializing out of thin air, and they're kind of keeping themselves busy with,
and they're terrible at what they do. It's funny. That's part of what I do, right? I have to stop. And this is going to sound dumb. I've done DEI classes in the past, and people loved it because my classes aren't about race or ethnic background or gender. They're all about emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
They're all about separating intent from impact so you can have a conversation.
Absolutely.
New DEI is the opposite. It is literally intent is irrelevant. All that matters is impact. Nothing else matters. There is no room to fail. There's no freedom to change and grow. None whatsoever. You are assumed guilty always. You must respect the victim more than anybody else, and you are a victim because you say you are one. It doesn't matter. That now, if I didn't have a conscience, like if I didn't have a soul, I would just do that and make a bunch of money. But I can't ethically go there and teach that. And the sad part is most organizations don't want what I teach anymore because they want one or two things. They want to check a box, right? Again, for legal, we did our training, box checked. Yeah. And how I would know that is I do some classes, and some people who've been in business know this. I would do a class, people would walk in, sign the attendance, and leave. They just check in a box. They don't care what I have to say. Sign the attendance and leave. And we saw a lot of that too. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but no, not at all. I think you're completely right on that. So because of this, you've also said something else, and that is the students. Not only have you talked about administrative bloat, you've talked about grades just being bloated. Tell me about that.
Yeah, the GPAs have just been going up and up and up, and I think there's kind of the gold star for doing it sort of mentality.
Gotcha.
I think that's a part of it, and I think also there's just a lack of autonomy and a desire to have your hand held through everything that I've seen continue. I was really surprised to see it continue at NYU. With professors that had very varying degrees of how much they're willing to kind of tell you, oh, this is how I would like you to write the paper, essentially, or this is the study guide of basically exactly what will be on the test. And if you do these things and you care enough and put in the effort, you'll get the A, which is the bar that a lot of professors I've found in my experience, the younger untenured professors would be more vulnerable to falling into that, especially because we would have ratemyprofessors.com, which I think is actually a super helpful resource, but we'd have student evaluation forms. And so there's kind of a sense of the students are the consumer and their grades are important because they're going to law school or here or there. And so they really I'm going to give them the kind of point A to point B of I had a 4.0 at NYU and I don't know what that really means, to be honest, because in a lot of classes, the average grade was an A-. So is it that just means I'm slightly above average? I don't really know if that proves much.
Yes. Well, no, it means you showed up.
Yeah. I showed up and I read the study guide.
Yes, that's what you did. You showed up.
And I think it just becomes a test of do you care enough or do your grades matter to you? And if you do, then here's your gold star, which is not, it just doesn't reward excellence. And NYU is an excellent school and there were excellent students there. And it was disappointing to me to see how much professors felt like they had to do that. I love when you show up and you do a test and it's okay, here are all the concepts and apply them now in a way that you've never seen before. And yeah, it would be the equivalent of doing problem sets in class. And then it's the exact same thing on the test. And if you've tried once, then here's your participation trophy for trying. Yeah.
I love that. That's very good. I love that. Let me grab a couple more comments if I can. Yeah. Pete Clark does this every time. Sorry. The national debt. I have to say it every single show. I'm sorry. 31,375,674.94. And since I read it, it's gone up.
It's certainly disturbing as a young person who feels like one day that might backfire on us.
There we go. Yes. Pete goes on to say, Generation X, we had no idea how good we had it and no clue we were the last ones. But you know what's funny? There is, about 10 years ago, give or take, 2012 or such in that area, people were, I heard them complaining about damn millennials, were always complaining. Yeah. I always had sympathy. And they would say, why? They're this and that. I said, they grew up when stuff wasn't good, right? Millennials came in at a bad time. Like there's crashes and things not going. And they were promised that if you just go to college and get debt, doesn't matter. This cool, thing is ready. But just learn to code or do the thing and there'll be a computer job and you'll make $100,000 a year typing. It'll be amazing. And Gen Z's tough too, because Gen Z now, your generation, you guys don't think about getting a job. You think about being an influencer.
Yeah.
Like that's what your generation does. When I was a kid, right? Again, back in my day, you young whippersnappers, back in my day, maybe somebody want to be a basketball star. Like I want to be a baseball player, right? Maybe that, right? But that was still a job, right? I mean, maybe if it was, but most people like, I'm going to be a businessman. I'm going to be a cop. I'm going to be a teacher, whatever. That was common.
Yeah.
But now millennials, they were all like, we're all going to be Elon Musk, right? We're all going to be, .com gurus or whatever, right? And now Gen Z's like, we're all going to be influencers.
Yeah.
And there aren't that many influencer jobs out there. There aren't that many professional basketball players either. I mean, but just aren't that many. So I've had some sympathy or empathy for both generations. Obviously, it's your generation. You must have it too.
Yeah. I mean, it's disturbing to see my generation also get pulled into that same loop of get your completely meaningless degree while you're going to do something completely different in the back of your mind. You have completely different aspirations and you're a YouTuber on the side. And I haven't really seen a lot of good long-term longevity goals from people who are going down that route. It's definitely concerning. I'm reporting right now for the New York Post about the differences between China's version of TikTok and America's version of TikTok. And one poll that I found in this research process was that by far the number one, they gave kids in China and the US 5 job options to pick from. By far the number one in China was astronaut, and by far the number one in America was social media influencer. And like,
wow.
And maybe not every kid in China is going to be an astronaut, but at least that's like aspiring to something versus just aspiring to like virtual stardom, which is not the same thing. It's definitely concerning. And I can't even imagine. I feel so lucky that I was 19, about to turn 20 when the pandemic happened. And in terms of generational experience, I feel like at least I'd lived in New York for 2 years. I'd been an adult. I'd had a landlord. I knew how to do a few of the things that, like, I had my feet on the ground just enough to have been able to land on my feet. And in terms of the context in which my generation is growing up, I don't think we've even seen the beginnings of the repercussions of the pandemic happening. I think it'll be super different and discrete just based on like what year of development it happened for kids. So I think long-term, even though there's a lot of unsavory aspects of my generation, I do think that there is reason and will be more reason to be sympathetic to us.
Yeah. And I also blame the parents, right? I mean, I see the parents of the kids. They are still pushing their kids in the college for no reason. They're still doing it. And people listening right now are like, no, you got to send your kids to college. You're wrong. You don't have to send your kid to college. I'm not against college. I'm against college without a plan. If I want to be a lawyer or an engineer where you have to get degrees to do a job, I think going to college is wonderful. Go be the engineer, go be the lawyer, go be the doctor. Makes total sense. But if you're like, I'm 18, I have to find myself, go to work. Don't go to college. Go to work, figure out what you like and don't like, and then say to yourself, what I like requires a college degree. Awesome. Go to college for that. Or go, it doesn't require. If you've seen, Google now has removed the requirement for a college degree already. They're removing it already. They're already going away. And I told people this years ago, but no one believed me. Again, I'm a business consultant. It's what I do, right? So well, last year I did. I was running for office. Prior to that, I have my ear to the ground. And I was telling people that in the high tech, like small tech world, or even like finance world, small company, a master's degree was a no hire 10 years ago. 10 years ago, they were like, master's degree? No, it was a no hire. They only wanted people who either done something or had just a bachelor's. Now in these companies, bachelor's is not required anymore. Master's is still a no hire. So I'm saying if you get a master's degree and get that extra $50,000, you will not be hired because you have that degree. The assumption is, and it's how they think, You've spent 6 years or 7 years now being told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need you.
Yeah.
It's not required.
100%. And it's been so interesting being like coming from the background of my dad didn't go to college. My mom went to Syracuse. And I went to a very hoity-toity boarding school where you go to college is a really big deal. And NYU wasn't even good enough really for most people there.
Feel like NYU, huh? Quaint.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yes.
and so it's just been such a fascinating kind of litmus test to be like the 4.0 student who really likes school and learning, but to tell people now, like, they're like, what are you doing? Like, did you graduate? What's up? And I'm like, oh no, I'm working. And the pandemic created a gap year that I never expected to have. I would never have gone off that trajectory. But I was not going to be paying full tuition at NYU for Zoom school. And that I started doing what I loved, and it snowballed and has become a career. And why would I stop it just to get that validation for, even though I love history, a history degree is not like, that was just my stepping stone to go to law school, to do something that I felt like was practical and lucrative and not what I love. And it's been really interesting because it's like, I would say like a dead 50-50. And the reaction is always like, ooh, like you dropped out, or like people are like, yeah, you're onto something. And
100%.
yeah,
Yes.
it's fascinating. It's really divides the crowd.
You live in New York now, right?
Yeah, I'm in LA at the moment, but
But you do live in New York.
Yes, I live in New York City.
Yeah, so you know what I know. All the baristas who have master's degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So all over Manhattan. And people think I'm joking when I'm not joking. I'm the kind of guy who talks to people. If you know me, I talk to everybody. So I talk to people. And there's people who have master's degrees who are working at probably every single Starbucks, at least one person with a master's degree in there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's completely true. And I think the pandemic has created a good kind of impetus. Having that happen at the same time as the student loan forgiveness mess and like an affordability crisis in general and people's wages struggling, I think it's created a market pressure that higher education just has not been exposed to, and I don't think would have been for quite a while if not for the pandemic. The enrollment rates are down considerably. There are a lot more kids that are just doing what they want to do and trying it out, and maybe even going to college later if that doesn't work out, which I think should be an option. I think it's 100%. Different male versus female. I do think there are like logistical differences to that I think some people aren't practical about sometimes, but yeah, I would say there's definitely a phase shift that I'm noticing in my generation. And I think that's a positive thing where it should be an option, but not a requirement. It shouldn't be stigmatized not to go. If you're a productive member of society, then good for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm really into the idea of like a gap year when you're 18. And that's sort of what accidentally happened to me and just pushed me down a totally different road.
In my situation, I joined the Marine Corps at 17. Mm-hmm. I didn't go to college until I was 21. Mm-hmm. I literally had several gap years, right? But when I went, and I was a terrible high school student. And I mean, terrible. Barely showed up, barely graduated, barely did anything. I probably had a 2.0 grade, if that, probably less than that. I barely graduated. But by the time I went to college, I wanted to go.
Yeah.
I was like a 3.8. That was for me, that was amazing, right? Yeah. Why? Not because I'm all of a sudden super smart, because I cared. I wanted to go. I had a plan. And I think if people have a plan and they want, you just do better because you have a plan and you want to do it. So you're just better at it.
Yeah, definitely. And I even look at like the comparison to, I do think it's difficult to kind of put a gun to like 18-year-old's head and say, pick your major and choose your life path. But I think like in the UK, they have the kind of version of at least choose your general path when you're applying to colleges, and you're supposed to have some sort of sense. I mean, by now you should know if you like math and science or if you're more of a humanities person and like some sort of path. I think forcing kids onto some sort of passionate path in high school is probably a healthier thing, because there's very much this like blasé attitude that you show up to, even NYU, which is not a liberal arts college. My first 2 years were just like, humanities and do your thing and take
Yes.
electives, and you don't need to know. You're not supposed to know. You're supposed to change your major 50 times, and like maybe once or twice, yeah, like you find something out
Yeah,
about
but
yourself.
you're also dropping, what's it, 50, 60 grand a year for that, NYU?
Like I think it's like 70. It's crazy.
70 grand a year for you to hang around and figure stuff
Learn
out?
yourself. Yeah, exactly.
So here's the option. I can pay NYU 70 grand a year to kind of figure things out, or I can go work, make money while I figure things out.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the work part. That's what I would like to do instead. So yes. Joel says a lot of kids did a gap year. Same reason. Why pay full cost for remote schooling? I think he's right. Do you think a lot of people in your generation did that?
Yeah, I think it was something like 25%, I want to say, is like the statistic that I remember of people who did some form of delayed something, or did like went part-time. Like they changed their trajectory, I think. I'm kind of making up that statistic, but it's something like that, in that vicinity. And that certainly was my social experience of most of my friends ended up kind of like taking some unexpected turn, whether that was just going part-time for a while and waiting it out to see if the pandemic would fix itself. But certainly for me, I finished my, I guess, what was it, the spring of 2020, I finished that semester because we started in person. And then I give my mom so much credit because she like watched me do that in her living room. And she said, like, listen, if you want to do one semester and take off and see if things are back to normal by the next semester, which I really hope that they would be. Like she said, I will support you through one semester financially, but do something really cool and make it worthwhile. And
I like that. It is good.
She was like, thank God she had the kind of trust in me to do that. And I started working for Megyn Kelly as my first media job, and things just kind of fell into place. And she was like, okay, we'll do the next, like you're doing well, let's do the next semester. And then
that's great.
Yeah.
I love that. Dave says easy college loans is why college is so expensive.
Yeah.
Yes. And Pete says college degrees cost 297% more than it did in 1979. A Happy Meal costs 20% more. One of these industries is subsidized by government. The other isn't.
Yeah, 100%. It's shocking how the student loan system, like I wouldn't, even as much as it makes me cringe to say this, I wouldn't be opposed to some degree of forgiveness, because I think that kids were just so misguided socially and by the system that they signed in and by
I agree with you.
schools themselves. But the thing that I'm just most viscerally allergic to is the fact that we did a partial forgiveness and then we didn't fix it for the next group.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Oh my
yes.
God. It makes me like cringe that we did that. It almost feels
that is my rule. If we're going to do forgiveness, and I hate the taste of that.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you. I watched it in my own kids.
Yeah.
I watched a system that pushed my kids in every way possible into college. Why? Because the schools get rewarded from federal money by their placement rate. So the industry is pushing you into college. Everyone around you is pushing you into college. Everywhere. I get that. But I have a huge comment. I'm with you 100% on this. If you don't fix the problem, no forgiveness unless you fix the problem. You fix the problem for the future, I'm open to it. I'm open to an idea of making something work. I am 100%. But I talked about an idea before. This is my plan. My plan was, if you're going to forgive loans, don't forgive it all. Forgive a huge chunk. Maybe I'm making this up. $20,000 or 50%, whichever's higher, or something like that, right? So that's the number you do, right? Something like that. So you much of it, and you add something else. You then say, all right, if you have a loan, you get to renegotiate the loan right now. You get to, period. You can renegotiate the loan right now. Doesn't matter what your agreement was. That agreement was through the federal government. It's null and void. You now may renegotiate it. Not just that. If you're in a real tough spot, you can discharge it with bankruptcy. If you're in a bad spot, allowing all of those options. Next, that's good, but it's not enough. What about all the people who paid off all their loans? All the people who went through it already.
Yeah.
Every one of them should get 1 free year of college credited to them. Now, the issue is many of them are older. They're not going to college anymore. No worries. It can be transferable. So they can now give that. So now I got a bunch of older people who went to college, 4 of them together. free college for my kid.
Yeah.
So now they get something. Does that make up for the student? It doesn't, but it is at least, it's something to say, I care. I see what you did. Let's make it whole. Give a gift to somebody. If you want to go back to college yourself, go back yourself. But if you don't, here is something to give. So, hey, look, I did it. Here's something for you. It's something. It's symbolic, but it matters. You have to give respect to the people who paid the debt, who did the thing. It helps them. Yeah. But third, now you treat colleges just like car dealerships. I'm not joking with this. Mm-hmm. If you go, when I was a kid buying a car back in my day, the dealerships didn't give loans. You had to go to a bank and give them the VIN number, and the bank would give you the money. The loan would be from the bank. Yeah. And you go to the car dealership and you give them a check. Not anymore. Now the car dealerships finance their own cars. They are their own finance company. Yeah. So make all the colleges their own finance company. They must finance their own loans. What would that do? Yeah. Now they care if your degree is worth something, because if it isn't, you're not paying it back. You have just created an incentive for the colleges to give you an actual valuable degree, and they will have to lower the pricing because people won't pay it back. The pricing will change. You'll get a better college degree, the lower price if they finance it themselves.
Yeah, I love that. And one thing I would add to that, another layer. Please. I think as much as I don't really like the Common Core, but we work in the system that we have, and I'm not going to burn it all down right now. I think adding financial literacy, basic financial literacy education.
Oh my God, yes.
School, like it blows my mind, the things that I know that I've never once used in my entire life. And the fact that I had no idea what an interest rate is. I had no idea how mortgage worked. I had no idea really how to deal with anything financial or like what sort of bank accounts I should be opening or what opening a line of credit means. And then the kind of separate, totally different tangent is the lack of nutritional education as well. Like I eat.
Oh my God, yes.
And like, those are two things that I'm like, those would be a lot more useful. But back to the college point, I think like helping kids actually understand the contracts that they're entering into with the federal government, when most of them have been educated by the government to up until that point, like we've just failed them so badly that I'm like, that it needs to be an amendment too, in my book.
Absolutely. Jean says, my student loan for a year of college was $2,500. I paid it off before buying a house. I like that. That was good. I did mine through the Marine Corps. Mine was virtually free. It was like $100. I mean, it was like nothing. It was dirt cheap. My entire college experience, including books, probably cost me, I don't know, $1,000. Like maybe. It was just almost nothing. Of course, I also have my life on the line. I could have been shot. However, that's what that's how it worked. So Pete brings up a valid point, and I'll address it. Pete says there's no such thing as loan forgiveness. Someone is paying the bill. They just aren't telling you that you're going to be the one on the hook. Well, what I would say, Pete, is you're right. And there's an and here, not a but, because you are correct. There's an and. We always seem to find money to bail out banks, to bail out countries, to start new wars. If we've got the billions to do that, let's not do that. And let's do this. That's an investment in our kids only, again, as Rikki says, if we're able to repair the situation to make it better for the future. You're still right, Pete. I agree. But it's not like the government's going to stop spending the money. I wish they would, right? But if you can drop $80 billion into some foreign aid project, you can drop $80 billion to American youth. Yeah. But you're right. Rikki, am I wrong here?
No, I completely agree. I think, if there's one thing to invest in, I think it's young people, especially post-pandemic, that are like, I think the rug has been pulled out from under a lot of people's feet, kind of like before they even really got themselves settled in a way that none of us could never have really imagined. So that's one place where I'm like, if I'm going to spend money endlessly as a federal government, that might be one place to do it. But also like reforming it is just, I can't even get over the fact that we moved and did not do that, because it's creating this perverse incentive now to take out more loans, because maybe it'll happen again. If it happened once,
yes,
it'll happen a second time. And I've heard people with that attitude, and like, to their credit, they're following the leadership of this country, and like
they're right.
They're gaming the system, but it's probably true, because we didn't fix anything and we realized it was so broken to put a Band-Aid on it, but we still haven't fixed it. So I'm concerned.
Well, that's the piece we bring up also, right? We've had Republicans in charge, Democrats in charge. We don't fix it. Yeah. And you have been a proponent of a third party. right? You think the two-party system, if I remember right, you believe that the two-party system is so devastating that it's actually breaking up families and
Yeah.
friendships, that you can't talk about certain things, you can't do things. And I've seen it here in New York. I've seen it break up families. I've seen it break up, business partners.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a problem, but it doesn't seem to make sense. Now, hear me out again. This goes back to my monolith thing. If it's so diverse on our media, how can a two-party system be doing the damage that it's doing?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't really have an answer to that because that really is a good question. I mean, I think that the kind of tentacles of what the duopoly influences in our society is so much broader and, in my view, more sinister than I think I even really understand. Like, to
Yep.
be completely honest, I've only kind of delved down this rabbit hole over like the past couple of years doing journalism and having the luxury of time to be thinking kind of for a living and thinking about these questions. And I certainly don't have the answers, but I certainly came to the conclusion that like this is much more sinister than I ever really felt. And
Yep.
like, even though I see these two parties as opposite, they're mutually benefiting from the enemy on the other side. And I think I have hope that my generation will kind of be an important push towards, even if it's not a third party, like a turn to like a totally independent candidate or anything kind of different and breaking that binary, because we've only known it in this like really hideously ugly partisan version of what America looks like. The first election I really remember is 2016 with any degree of like maturity behind me. I know even then I was 15 in the lead up. And like I just don't think my generation will accept that continuing to tear us apart. I don't think we can.
I think you're right. And I think my answer to my own question is so many are checking out, right? You're having so many of the youth simply not identify as Democrats or Republicans, just checking out, just not identifying at all. I think that seems to be the answer in general. The scientific libertarian says, most of my arguments on similar subjects have to happen on Twitter. For some reason, I get really low post reach. Oh, so to my Twitter. Thank you. I brought this up because I want to do this. Thank you. I'm throwing my brother this up. Because if you want to follow Rikki, she's on Twitter. So please follow her on Twitter. Rikki Schlott. Follow her. And if you're listening to this only, not watching, RIKKISCHLOTT or RikkiSchlott.com. Either of those are good. And if you want to help me out, you can go to theadvocates.org. They are my sponsor, right? If you go to theadvocates.org, take one of their quizzes or take one of their tests, either one. They have surveys and all types of things, right? Take one of their surveys, about 6 or 7 minutes or 2 minutes for the world's smallest political quiz. Take it. If you like what the advocates are doing, they're the advocates for self-government. If you like what they're doing, give them your email address. This way they can send you stuff their emails are very rare, maybe once a month. They'll send you an email saying, hey, here's our new test. Here's a new survey. Here's what's going on. If you like it. If you don't like them, no worries. Don't give your email address. You can still take the test and share it. Share the results so that people will start talking. The advocates are an important sponsor for me. Why? Because they get people talking. That's what the show is all about. That's what the advocates do. So please go there, support the show. It's free, 100% free. Supports the show for free. If you want to support the show and throw some cash my way, please do so. Head over to Super Chats on YouTube, Larry Sharp. Super Chat. Always a good way of doing that if you want to. And I ask you all the time. I know I keep asking, but I can't stop. If you like this show, click that damn like button. Why haven't you clicked it already? Do it. Click that button. It does matter. And if you're watching on Twitter, please retweet this show right now as we speak. It does matter. All right. Sorry, I had to do a bit of bookkeeping there. I appreciate that. The other piece I want to bring up here is third party. You've said you like Forward. Forward was very good to me last year. They endorsed me. Andrew Yang was on stage with me last year at Freedom Fest, endorsed me. It was good. I enjoyed it. Do you think Forward's the answer, number one? Or if it's not Forward, is it something else? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, I truly don't know. I've interviewed with Andrew. I think he's awesome. I think he's totally out of the box in a way that's so refreshing as a political figure. I think what they're advocating for is so like so dead on, and the open partisan or open primaries and ranked choice voting and all these initiatives, but it requires a level of buy-in from people to actually pay attention, because they're not sexy concepts to say.
Which is why I call it the brogram.
Yeah.
B is better ballot access, R is ranked choice voting, and O is open primaries. The brogram. That's sexier, isn't it? Oh, Mike's too old.
I like that. No, that's great.
Here we go. Here we go.
Anything to make it more interesting to people, I'm down for. I truly don't know how it's going to look long term. I think, there's definitely the difficulty that they run into of wanting to bring people together, but then kind of not being able to take any hardline stances on any partisan issues that are very important to people. And so I don't really know what the answer is in terms of like whether that means they would run their own independent candidate or just endorse people who do share the really important common fundamental values of being a kind of third party advocate or nonpartisan advocate. So I don't know if they're the answer. I love what they stand for. I support them. Certainly I support their activism. But I don't know how that looks when most people don't have the luxury of time to dig into what different electoral systems look like and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I want to go a little bit. I want to shift into the idea of institutions, right? We talk about the two-part duopoly institution, colleges, institutions, high schools, institutions. You've said that the elite institutions in America are affecting society. They're changing or shifting society negatively. How in the world can we fight against that, right? How, or do we? Or how do you handle when you have colleges, elite colleges, high schools, the duopoly, elite, media, corporate media? How do we stop them from making the change or shifting the culture in a negative way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a general phase shift of people, especially I feel like I watched the pandemic be a moment where a lot of people, especially a lot of young people, were kind of going down the like kind of pre-chewed narrative route of this is the world as you should see it, and had the luxury of time and kind of the frightening luxury of time sometimes to look around and doubt things and question things in a way that maybe they hadn't before. And so I don't really know if there's a solution to it beyond just people kind of waking up to the influences that are happening in their day-to-day lives. I think, that is a rosy view of my generation, but I do think that there were a lot. I think I've seen a lot of young people, and I become like the human receptacle for everybody's like thought crimes, because everyone will come to me and be like, oh, I haven't seen you since the pandemic, and I think I actually kind of agree with you on this thing, or I think I might be a libertarian, but don't tell anyone. And when you look at the statistics of my generation, we're a lot more moderate than I think most people think we are. And we have some really loud, extreme squeaky wheels.
Yes.
I think that there's I think as many voices as can kind of be advocates for common sense in the media, and as many independent media creators like yourself and people doing their podcasts and doing their own thing as we possibly can to kind of organically, like I'm not a tear down all the institutions kind of person in any way, but like organically challenge things and for ourselves. I think there's been some positive progress thanks to the pandemic, weirdly.
Well, I think you're right. There was some silver lining to the shutdowns. There absolutely was. But you went back to that, idea of different voices. Well, one of the things that the institutions are changing is the words we use, right? The way we speak. And you said, don't tell anybody. Now we're self-censoring.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to say the words, because words of violence. You mentioned once that you had to take a Jordan Peterson book you had and hide it under your bed, right? The idea is you don't want to say the wrong thing or be part of the wrong thing, because now words are violence, which that it's never been that before. But now words are violence. I mean, this to me is the scariest part. Gen Z is the worst of all the generations when it comes to words of violence.
Yeah, 100%. And just a fundamental misunderstanding of what free speech is and why it's important and what its utility is. And the idea that like tolerating even the stuff that is the most disgusting to you is required for a liberal society. I don't think my generation, so many people think they're liberals and no one really knows what that word means. And
Right.
some of them are actually illiberal. We don't have a very fundamental understanding of our rights and the First Amendment right, which I think underpins all of this. And
Mhm.
like, there's just such a kind of coziness to the idea of like banning hate speech, but what does that mean? And like, what
Right.
are the contours of that? And who are you to be the arbiter of that? Of course, there's objectively like reprehensible speech, but what should be the like, how do we arbitrate that? I don't know, but my generation seems certain that we should somehow, or some people should, and some vague
Well, I
authority
do
figures
think we
justify
have
it.
to worry about that. We do.
Yeah.
I don't think all speech is good, and some speech should be illegal. For example, threats.
Yeah.
If I say, I'm going to go get this guy, or hey, everybody, let's go get her,
Yeah.
that is illegal speech, right?
Yeah.
I am threatening violence. I am getting people to go do the bad thing. Of course, I should be investigated. Of course, I should be punished for that, right? I can say, I hate that guy or I hate that girl. That's totally free. I can call that girl, that guy names 100%. But once I start saying, let's get her, you go do this to him, that's different. And my issue is we're not basing it upon, is it directly leading to violence or not? We're basing it on, am I offended or not? That is a huge difference in my head.
100%. And that my generation does not understand that. And I don't really quite understand how we grew up just blankly reciting the First Amendment for history classes and not realizing what that actually means or why that's important. I mean, I have to say, I went through, like, I went to a great high school. I think I had a really great education. I really enjoyed my 2 liberal arts years at NYU, even though I'm not sure how much that actually advanced me. But I read so much. And yet during the pandemic, I, for the first time, got my hands on John Stuart Mill's On Liberty.
Ooh.
And it like blew my mind in a way that's really embarrassing now looking back, because I'm like, I grew up like a proud American who like knew what all my rights were, but didn't really understand why they were so like precious. And so even for me, with that background and doing 2 years of philosophy and learning every other philosopher that's notable, I didn't really understand what liberalism was until very recently in the scheme of my life, and until the pandemic and really locking down and questioning, like, and reading for myself and doing my own homework. And so my generation has been failed on that front, I think. And taught that, like, being, America's not perfect, but appreciating the goodness of it and the things that we've figured out and its novelty in the scheme of human history is not a taboo, and it shouldn't be one. But unfortunately, we've been taught that it is.
Absolutely. I'm with you completely. That is my biggest concern, is that we're almost taking it for granted. It's almost like I now have a right to be awesome, right? Like, that's the feel. Why am I not feeling good and awesome now? Someone must be oppressing me, right? And that goes to the next piece. And you brought this up too. The idea of, I start my sentences with as a, and then I put in the victim, right? So as a woman, as a person of color, as a member of the LGBT community, and then I talk. Like, that now means once I say the as a, now you can't attack me anymore because you're by default punching down, which is bad. So you can't now refute anything I say. Because now it's my lived experience. So you're evil if you refute it. And when I say as a, the victim is now equivalent to hero. Being a victim is a hero, right? And that's not the same, right? Victims are victims, and we should feel bad for victims. We should have empathy and sympathy and try to assist victims. Of course, we should punish people who attack them. Yes. Doesn't make you a hero, though. The hero is someone who has the affliction, whatever that thing is, and then still achieve something. But just having the thing doesn't make you a hero. It makes you a victim. So the second piece is, you are a victim because you say the thing. So as a woman, victim. Wait a minute. Is every woman a victim? In this world, yes. As a person of color, victim. Wait, is every person of color a victim? In this world, yes. Now, what I'd rather someone say is, as a victim of a violent crime. Okay, you're a victim. As a person who's been sexually assaulted. Okay, you're a victim, right? That's true. That's a victim. Tell
Yeah.
me that. And my ears are wide open.
Mhm.
But now I'm simply trying to find something to make me a victim. And
Yeah.
there are memes, my daughter has shown me those memes that say, hey, what kind of mental illness can I claim where I can, still be okay, but I can use slurs? Like that's like a meme.
Mhm.
This part drives me crazy. Am I over exaggerating here or no?
No, not at all. I mean, when I was at NYU, the percentage of statements in like discussions that would start with as a blank was enormous. And
Yep.
I would say even in my own like limited sense, I think my only real intersectionality point is being a woman. And there was pressure to kind of play that up or write from that perspective. And I think the problem that you're getting at is the fact that like leaning on immutable characteristics and saying that there should be an assumed shared set of experiences is really reductive, whereas having an
Yep.
actual experience that's individual is a totally separate thing.
Absolutely.
And I think there's something really disturbing to me about that with my generation, because we're the most diverse generation of human beings to ever share a country ever in human history. And that's a really beautiful thing. But this idea that you can only comment on certain issues or cultural and societal challenges if you fit a certain box, or if your immutable characteristics line up a certain way, is not a sustainable way that we could ever solve problems as a diverse country and community, or even as a diverse college on like the smaller scale, or even with a diverse friend group. And the idea that you need to preface statements that way is so ingrained in the educational system. I don't think anyone has ever said like you should do this, but you hear the liberal arts conversations at NYU. It was like, well, as of this X, Y, and Z, like I read this paragraph differently because of my immutable characteristics for some reason. Like,
right. Yes.
read it differently, and you're you, and that's fine. We don't have to start with an asa.
Right. Yeah. You could just say, I thought this. That's
Yeah.
fine. That, I think that because I'm this thing. No, you thought that because you're who you are. Absolutely. The reason why I bring this up is I see it now. I ran for governor last year, and I watched New York State governor speak all the time, right? It's one of the things I do when I would watch her presentations. Every single time she brought up the fact she was a woman.
Mhm.
And when I say every time, I literally mean every single time. There is not one time she hasn't said like, and being the first woman and as a woman and we women, and now, it's because he, or she'll go, every person and she, like she'll specify the she part, right? Every single speech. And not that I'm against using your gender, your race, ethnic background, religion. Sometimes it's appropriate, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes you talk about if you're talking about the idea, of sexual assault, bringing up the fact you're a woman may be pertinent in any given conversation because you're obviously more susceptible to being sexually assaulted than a male. That's statistically true, right? So I get that kind of bringing up, but she brings it up when she's talking about the budget.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter what gender you are for the budget. It's not a valid point. But now she's brought it up so much, she must always. Now, here's my problem for the future. What happens if the next governor is not a woman? Does the next governor now have to say whatever they are or make something up? If they don't, what's going to happen? They're going to be attacked as being a misogynist or an ageist or an ableist. They're going to be, why didn't you mention the people of color in the room?
Yeah.
Why do I have to? Because clearly you don't care about them. Clearly you don't care about the victims. That is my worry, that we create a world where now everyone has to mention all the victims.
Yeah.
And if we do that, victimization becomes herohood. So everyone has to be a victim.
Yeah.
If everyone's a victim, who's being the hero?
Yeah. Yeah.
And my bigger issue on the whole thing is every time fascists take over, every single time, every time fascists take over, who are the foot soldiers who will do all the horrible, dirty work? It is people who believe it. Sorry, it's not. I'm sorry. It is young men who believe they are victims. Every time.
Yeah.
These are the people who fill the ranks of the fascist foot soldiers who will do all the evil things to the population. It will be young men who believe they are victims. We are literally creating an army for the next fascist leader.
Yeah.
We are recruiting his entire army for the next fascist leader. And when he gets them all in a row and they start putting us in camps and doing horrible atrocities, we will have made our own bed.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and it's something that I also, as a woman, cringe at hearing from
Yes.
Kathy Hochul. As a woman, that makes me cringe. But I think, yeah, it's definitely so ingrained in my generation that victimhood is some sort of like currency to be used, and
Yeah.
it's really distorted. And I would say it's also just consistently frustrates me. Like I Megyn Kelly was my hero in the media, and will say and has said that she won't go to like women in journalism awards, because why is the fact that I'm a woman the reason that I'm being honored here? Like, this is not, that shouldn't be the category. Like, I'm just a journalist.
Right.
And if I'm good at being a journalist, then tell me I'm good at being a journalist. And I love
Right.
about her and that sensibility. My mom's the same way. And I hate this sort of mentality of, I need to preface like that I'm here in spite of my gender or whatever. Like when you
Right.
are, of course, Kathy Hochul is a statistical exception, an anomaly as a female governor, and her message should not be, I'm here in spite of it, and you're
Right.
so, it's so hard for you. It should be like, I'm here and I did it, and like, be the next female governor of New York.
Yes.
It's not like, it's just the most inverted, disempowering sort of message you could possibly give people.
Absolutely, absolutely true. Chelsea says one of the most repulsing demands of the woke crowd is that you must denounce people who have views you disagree with. This is true. It isn't just the woke crowd, though. But yes, this I think goes to that duopoly piece, Rikki, that you were talking about. If it's only a duopoly, the other side is clearly evil. So why would you talk to those people? They're the evil people, right? Here in New York, when someone uses the word conservative, that's an insult.
Yeah.
That's not a descriptor, right? That is an insult. That's right. So,
Experienced that one firsthand at
absolutely.
NYU.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, but we've set up a world to where that's how that works. That is what I worry about, right? Shelley says, my children were told in history class that Bill Clinton wasn't impeached. I had to explain impeachment and removal. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. We've had 3 impeached presidents, none removed. But people don't get that, right? We've had 3 and none removed. And Trump is the only one who's been impeached twice. The only one. Bill Clinton, Andrew Johnson, both once, and then Trump twice. And I'm sure they'll impeach Biden for something too. So they'll all be impeachment will be a new badge of honor. How many times have you been impeached? Only once? Rookie numbers. That's it. Rookie numbers. You got impeached once? What are you? You're not working hard enough. That's very good. So, is there anything else that we should be chatting about before we wrap this up? Did I miss something?
I don't know if there's anything top of my mind. I feel like this has been such a great conversation, and you have such a great sense of the topics that I've been speaking about and stuff. So I really appreciate that. And I think we've got a lot of common ground here. So it's been, is there anything else that's at the top of your mind?
I will turn you into a libertarian one of these days. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to pull you over. I'm going to pull you from the forward party into the libertarian party. That's all I'm going to do.
Yeah, I'm a kind of happy independent, and I think I'll endorse someone whenever I see the person that I believe in, and I think that's a trend in my generation. I hope more people will follow it. So I think I'm a registered libertarian. I'm.
Are you in New York? Are you in New York State?
No, I'm still in Jersey. I have to switch mine over.
Oh, probably you could be a libertarian. You could be. If you're registered in New York State, you can't anymore. We've lost ballot access. But you could do it in New Jersey. Absolutely, you could. 100%. Guys, if you want to follow Rikki, please head over to our website, rikkischlott.com, and follow her on Twitter. It's Rikki Schlott on Twitter. And that, for those of you who are listening and not watching, RIKKISCHLOTT, both .com and on Twitter. And guys, help me out. If you like what you saw, please retweet it. If you like what you saw, please hit that like button. It does matter. Follow me on YouTube. It does matter. These little things matter. It's how I grow. If you want me to keep doing this and support my sponsors, theadvocates.org. Go over there, take a test. It's free. Just do it anyway. Take one of those tests and share it so that people see it and get those conversations going. It really does matter. Guys, thank you so much for today. Rikki, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It was truly a pleasure.
There we go. Absolutely. Guys, I will see you all. I'll be on again tomorrow. I will see you all very soon.